Okay, so last video for this week is going through the senses, so the ear and the eye. Okay, so I'm going to go through the eye first of all. Looking at the eye, we have 15 different parts that we need to know about, and we need to be able to label on the picture of the eye, the diagram of the eye. So you girls need to be able to actually draw this picture of the eye, probably better than mine, and be able to talk about the 15 different functions of all the parts. And the last thing is looking at how your eye is affected by light being present or light being absent. And the last thing is disorders of the eye. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the eye and all of the parts to it. So I hope you can see this. I've numbered all of them 1 to 15, and then I'm going to go through 1 to 15 for the functions of the eye, okay? So number 1 is the conjunctiva here. So this is a thin layer that sits on the front of your eye. It's a transparent membrane, and it's there to protect the eye, which is called the conjunctiva. Okay, so conjunctiva, think of conjunctivitis. Conjunctivitis is too much mucus building up on the outer surface of your eye, and it basically sticks your eyelashes together. Okay, number 2 is the cornea. So the cornea is the layer that sits underneath the conjunctiva on the surface of the eye. Okay, the cornea lets light into the eye. Okay, number 3 is the pupil. So pupil is the space that we see at the front of our eye, okay? It sits in between the iris. So your iris or your iris is the colored part of your eye, so normally brown, blue, or green. Okay, the pupil is the open space that sits in the middle of your iris. It's the black part of your eye that you would see. Okay, number 4 is the iris or the iris. The iris is the colored part of your eye. Normally, if you are lacking melanin in your skin, the pigment that you would find in your skin, if you're lacking melanin, your eyes are usually blue. So your iris or your iris, it changes shape depending on the amount of light that's present. So if you think about if you were at home and asked somebody, can you please close your eyes for a few seconds, and you stare into that person's eyes, and when they open them, you'll see that the black part of their eye, their pupil, is bigger. So the reason for that is because their eyes are adapting to the darkness when they close their eye, and they're trying to get in as much light as they can. So they open wide, the pupils open wide to let in as much light as they can. And then when they open their eyes are adapting to the amount of brightness that's there. So what happens? The pupil will get a lot smaller, and the iris, the colored part of your eye, looks a lot bigger. Okay, so the iris, that changes shape depending on the amount of light that is present in your surroundings. Okay, so 5, we have the lens. Everybody's heard of the lens before. The lens is something that changes shape depending on the light that is present. Okay. So the next part is 6 and 9, which is the aqueous humor and the vitreous humor. Okay, so the two of these, aqueous humor and vitreous humor, are basically the fluid-filled sections that are here. So it is the fluid that's in here. So 6 and 9, aqueous humor and the vitreous humor, they are the fluid that gives the eye its shape. 7 we have down here is the ciliary body. Okay, so the ciliary body and the ciliary muscle. So the ciliary body is the black dot, and the ciliary muscle is the blue all over, the smaller part of the overall thing here. So the ciliary muscle basically pulls on or relaxes to pull on the suspensory ligament that holds onto the lens. So if an object is close to us, we don't need the lens to be elongated, we need the lens to be small and fat. So what happens is the ciliary muscle, it extends and the suspensory ligament relaxes, so the lens will go fatter. Okay, if something is far away, we want the lens to be thin and wide, so the ciliary muscle, it goes tense, pulls on the suspensory ligaments, and pulls the lens to be long and thin. Okay, so that's the ciliary muscle. Ciliary muscle, it changes shape of the lens. Suspensory ligament, number 8 here, it does the exact same thing. It attaches the ciliary muscle to the lens, and again, it is to change the shape of the lens. So number 9, we have said already, it is the vitreous humor and the aqueous humor. They're the same thing, the fluid that is in your eye. Number 10 is the sclera. So the sclera is the purple outline that we see here. So the sclera is the white of the eye, basically. So, you can see around your actual pupil, and your iris is the white part of your eye. The proper term for that is your sclera. The choroid is number 11. The choroid is the black line that you see here. Okay, the choroid, it's really rich in blood vessels. It supplies blood to the eye, and it prevents reflection of light in the actual eyeball. Number 12 is the orange layer that we see here. So the retina. The retina is the innermost layer, and it contains these nerve receptors called rods and cones, which are the most important in receiving light into the eye and receiving colour into the eye. So cones they will absorb coloured light. So when we're talking about yellow, blues, greens, reds, when we're talking about rods will absorb black and white colours. Okay, we're going to talk about rods and cones a bit more in a few minutes. Fovea is here, it's the black dot that is here. Okay, so the fovea is a specific area of the retina, and it only contains cones. So it's the region of the eye that has the sharpest vision. The blind spot here, this is where nerves leave your eye, okay? So your image is taken in the fovea, and the nerves that will carry the image will go through the blind spot here and be transported along on the optic nerve to carry information to the brain about what the eye is actually seeing. Okay, so they are the different parts of the eye. I might take a picture of this and put it up onto the Google Classroom as well if you think it will help. Okay, so talking more about what are rods and cones. So rods and cones, these are light receptors that we find in your retina and in your fovea. Okay, so in the fovea, it specifically only has cones there, and in the retina it has rods and cones. So these are light receptors that detect different colours that our eyes can see. Rods, they are longer, shaped like this, okay? They are going to detect black and white colours. They work in dimmer light. They're found only in the retina. Whereas cones, they detect colour and they work in bright light, and they are found mostly in the fovea. They are found in the retina too, but there's more of them in the fovea. Okay? Moving on to when our eyes respond to light. I was talking to you about this already. If you can, use somebody who's willing to help you see this in your house. So if you're standing in bright light, your eye, the actual pupil of your eye goes a lot smaller, and the iris, the coloured part of your eye, is a lot bigger. So that is your eye trying to stop so much light going into it. Okay, whereas when you're in dim light, or the lights go out, or you're walking on the street at nighttime, your pupils, the black part of your eye, is going to go a lot bigger, and the iris, and the coloured part is going to go a lot smaller, because it wants to try and let in as much light as it can for you to make out what your surroundings are. Okay. So the term accommodation, just to go through what this means, it is the changing shape of your lens in your eye. So if you have an object that is close to you, the light is diverging from this object. Okay, so diverging, it means that it's so close to you that the light around it is basically dispersed. It's going outwards. So our eyes need to bring it back in and need to converge that light to focus the object on our retina so we can make out what that object is. Okay, what happens is the lens needs to be fatter for this divergence to happen. For this convergence to happen, for the light to be brought back closer together inside our eye. So to make our lens fatter, what we need to do is the suspensory ligaments, their tension eases. Okay, the tension that the suspensory ligaments hold on the lens, it eases. So that allows the lens to become shorter and fatter. So basically, the ligament is letting go, and the lens is able to just take on a regular shape. Okay. Whereas if the object is far away and we're trying to see that object perfectly, we want the light to come into the eye, but it's coming in a parallel way. Okay, so what happens is the suspensory ligaments, they pull on the lens, and the lens is going to go thinner. So the suspensory ligaments are working to try and make the lens as thin as possible. So it's pulling on the lens to make it thinner. Okay, and that's accommodation. Accommodation is the changing shape of the lens to focus light on objects that are either close to us or far away from us. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to go through with you on the eye is talking about eye problems or eye disorders. So being long-sighted or being short-sighted. So long-sighted means that you can see things that are far away very clearly, but you cannot make out objects that are very close to you. They seem blurry. What do we do? As a corrective measure, you need to use convex lenses to bend the light into your eye before it enters into the eye. For short-sighted, this means that distant objects appear blurry. So what do? We use concave lenses, which diverge the light before it enters into the eye. So it spreads out the light more so before it enters into the eye. Okay, so that is the end of the eye. Moving on to the ear. The ear may be slightly easier for you to understand, okay? Again, you need to be able to draw the picture of the ear and be able to discuss the functions of the ear. And the last thing about the ear is talking about ear disorders. So the parts of the ear are broken into different areas. We have the outer ear, what you can see from looking at somebody else's ear. The middle ear, which contains 3 tiny little bones, which are called ossicles. These are called the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. The stirrup is this tiny one here, and that is the smallest bone in your body. Okay, and now the inner ear. The inner ear is the biggest part of your ear, okay? And we're going to go through all of the different parts of the inner ear as well. So there's 10 different parts to the ear that you need to be able to know the function of. So the pinna is the cartilage part of the ear that's on the outside that you can make out here. So what does it do? It's made out of cartilage, but what it does, it's like a tunnel. It collects sounds and channels it through into the auditory canal that's here. Okay, so the auditory canal, this part here, it carries those vibrations to the inner and the middle eardrum. Okay, so the auditory canal is just a transport pipe, basically. It is going to carry vibrations of sound through into the middle and inner ear. 3, 4, and 5. So 3, 4, and 5 are the 3 different types of bones that we find in the middle ear: the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. Again, the stirrup is the smallest bone in your body. Tiny, tiny little thing here. Okay, and what they do is they transmit vibrations to the inner ear. Okay, so the oval window is the part of the inner ear that is connected to the stirrup. Okay, vibrations here cause the fluid in the cochlea down here to move. So we carry vibrations into our ear, in through the pinna and the auditory canal, into the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, which are going to transmit vibrations to the inner ear. The vibrations transported from the stirrup to the oval window here will cause the cochlea to actually vibrate here, to move, and for us to pick up the oval window, which is here connected to the stirrup, and it's the first part of the inner ear. Vibrations here cause fluid that's in the cochlea here to move. The semicircular canals, the 3 of them up here, the semicircular canals, they are 3 tubes that contain fluid and are responsible for our balance. Okay, so are responsible for us to be able to maintain our balance. The auditory nerve is this part here. The auditory nerve sends messages to our brain about what we have heard. The cochlea, what I've said already here, the cochlea, it's a coiled tube, it looks like a snail. What it does is it contains lots of nerve cells, and it converts fluid movement to nerve impulses for us to send those nerve impulses to the brain. So it converts fluid movement, the fluid inside the cochlea, that movement, it is converted into nerve impulses for us to pick up messages in our brain. And the last part is the eustachian tube. So the eustachian tube here, that's connected to your throat actually, and what it does is like if you've ever yawned, or if you've gone in an airplane and your ears pop, that is your eustachian tube opening up. The eustachian tube is normally a closed tube, but what its main function is to equalize air pressure. That's why when you're in an airplane and you can feel your ears are getting sore, it's because the air pressure is unequal in your eustachian tube, and your eustachian tube has been opened up, it's normally closed. Okay, so the last part about the ear is just for you to understand ear disorders. You would have heard about these already. The one that I'm going to talk about already. It's called glue ear. It happens when a child is experiencing a surplus amount of wax in their middle ear, and it results in partial deafness. So it's kind of like things sound foggy. How do we correct that? You can either take drops up your nose and this clears your eustachian tube, or if the condition is worse and the drops aren't helping, grommets are put into the child's middle ear. They fall out at a later stage once their middle ear has grown in size. But what the grommets do is they allow air into the ear, and that equalizes the air pressure in your eustachian tube. Okay, so that's the end of the ear.